All right, well, I hope you had an excellent week and you're ready to jump in this morning. We have a lot of ground to cover. We'll see if we can get through most of it. Remember why we're here? If you would not mind, sir, sitting at the back, and then you can pass those out to those who come in shortly. Our goal is to instill biblical principles regarding personal money management into the lives of all of us, okay? And the idea is ultimately to provide us all with some practical guidance that will lead the diligent disciple to debt-free, financially secure life of generosity in accordance with the will of God. That's what we're trying to get to. And our first lesson focused on this fact that a wise person seeks counsel, a wise person seeks advice. And we gave you lots of scriptural references to substantiate why that was a good idea. Then we talked in our last lesson about how we handle our money affects our relationship with the Lord. So there is a direct correlation between how we're handling our money and what kind of relationship we have with God. And we'll review just a couple of verses here in a moment. But before we do, I kind of want to say this. So here you are. You're seeking and following godly advice. You're trying to handle your money right. You're beginning to see the importance of using temporal wealth to further eternal purposes. But you say, that's all well and good. I still don't have any money. And I still am at the end of my money before I'm at the end of my month. Okay? So let me at least say to you, hang in there. Because if we just plunge ahead into the real practical kind of things alone, and you don't see their value, and I don't see their value, they will not be long lasting. And you'll just frankly fall right back into whatever patterns you had before. So our goal is not to just say, hey, here's this easy 1, 2, 3 step plan for your financial success. And obviously that deterred a few folks because they haven't been back, very frankly. They were looking for that easy fix. That, hey, I want to show up, I want this guy to tell me how to make my money problems go away, and then I'm going to quit coming on Sunday mornings. Frankly, that's about what they thought. Why do I know that? Because they're not here, and they haven't been here. You're here. You've at least recognized this is going to take me a little while to figure this out. Okay? Trust me, you didn't get where you are overnight. I didn't get where I got overnight. It took me lots of years to get there. Okay? So we're not going to unwind that in 1 or 2 easy 3-step processes. So hang in there. We want to lay some foundation. We want to make sure we do it the right way with the right purposes. Because if you do it the right way with the right purposes, you will succeed. Period. It's proven. It's promised. Scripture promises you that. Okay. Last week, remember Luke 16:11? If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you true riches? Remember we talked in context about that lesson in depth. Remember, we went to the shrewd steward, okay? The one who was getting fired but recognized, hey, my time is short. I need to act now. I need to follow a plan. And I need to invest what I have right now, those assets at my disposal, to take care of things in the future. And from that, we derive the importance of investing the temporal wealth that we're given into the eternal purposes. So we talked money, ultimate purpose. Money's ultimate purpose. And it was to be used to help make more citizens of heaven. That's our goal. Using the temporal to invest in the eternal. Putting your treasure where God's heart is. Okay? And ultimately, as you begin to put your treasure where God's heart is, even though yours may not be there, ultimately your heart will come there as well. You know, Jesus told us, and God advised us early on in the scriptures, that I'll take obedience over anything. So if he says, put your money where my heart is, he understands that just simply by doing that, ultimately our heart will follow. Okay, we have this thing called a mind, and it has to get changed, and it's what derives the input we take and synthesizes it and works down into our heart and our lives as we move forward. So, the principles of success that we have seen so far: seek and follow godly advice. Acknowledge that you and I spend money on things we value. That's the best indication of what you and I value. It's where our checkbook says our money is going. Then place value on what God does, and now start to spend your money accordingly. Not on what you have found that you value, but what you have learned that God values. So today we're going to talk about whose job is what. Whose job is what? Who does what in this whole financial thing, right? So here's our principle for the day that you have on your lesson. God owns it all, controls it all, and provides all that we need. Okay, that's the key concept today. God owns it all, controls it all, and provides all that we need. So what are some of the more than 200 names that God has called in the Scripture that you can think of? You got any? Just what are they? Okay, what else? Okay, what else?
Prince of Peace.
Jehovah, Prince of Peace. What else? Okay, Wonderful Counselor. What else? What's that? Jehovah Jireh. Okay, so quickly we can come up with some names, right? Because remember, that's how God made himself manifest and known. He came into a particular situation, and his name was kind of given to him, right? This is not a name that he always brought to the table. This was often a name that the people who interacted with God gave God because of how he acted and his character in a specific situation. Jacob would give a name to God. Abraham would give a name to God. Moses would give a name to God by virtue of how they saw him interact in a very specific situation. So relative to money and relative to the temporal wealth that we have, which of God's names do you think best reflects his role in our lives relative to money and possessions? Counselor. It's a good one. We talked about that one, right? What else? Which stands for? Okay, Lord our provider. What else? Anybody? How about this one? And both of those are good because they certainly lend towards an understanding. But as we think about his role in our lives relative to the things that pass us through our hands, how about simply Lord? Or better, Master? Lord and Master. So I would purport to you this morning that that is the best way to think about God when you think about what you have. When you think about what you see pass through your hands, that wealth, those possessions, that money, those things that he places under your charge. Here's a statement. How we view God determines how we live. Okay. If this is true, how does our view of God impact our finances? So think about that a minute. How we view God determines how we live. Remember, we've heard this in lots of examples. If you have a small God, if you view God as limited and unable to accomplish things, then you live in a certain manner. If you have a big God who you believe can accomplish anything, you live differently. Relative to money, then, does that view of God impact our finances? And if so, how? Think of the term we just said was one of the best to use relative to who he is in our finances.
Because he provides all we need.
Okay?
And most of us live beyond what we need.
True. True. What about him as Lord and Master? What's our view of God as Master, as Lord? If that's how you view him, does that impact your finances?
Because it impacts where the source is. If we think that we're the ones gaining and attaining our finances, then that affects how we do it.
Well, Scott, I can't even be obedient in what my Lord is asking me to do if I'm pressed so tight. I mean, so in a sense, and I mean, like, speaking from a personal example, I can't, he's really not my master when I say, when MasterCard's my master.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It's
True.
just, I can't say yes to him if I'm already saying yes to money, which is interesting enough that Jesus told us that.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Right here, you come. Unless you don't want to.
He thought about it though. He stopped and was like, I don't know.
You don't have to. All right. That's a different class altogether. We won't get into that. All right. Let's move in our Bibles really quickly this morning. First Chronicles 29, 11, and 12. And I have it up here, so follow with me. Read this verse. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty, for all that is in the heavens and in the earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom of Lord, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. In your hand are power and might, and in your hand it is to make great and to give strength to all. I don't know if you've read that verse before, but that's a pretty awesome verse. What doesn't that include? Let me read it again. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty, for all that is in the heavens and in the earth is yours. What's left out of that equation?
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing. Nothing. So consider this verse. According to the above scripture, God is the what? Sole owner of what? Everything. So that's your three words. Sole owner of everything on your sheet there. So according to 1 Chronicles and lots of other scriptures, God is a sole owner of everything. God is the one who is in what? Control of everything, exactly. He is the one who is in control of everything. And God alone is the one who what? Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. In your hand are power and might, in your hand to make great and to give strength to all. God alone is the one who provides everything. So, did you get all those points? Do you see what part God is responsible for relative to your finances? What job does he have? God owns, controls, and provides what? Everything. Now, I know we're talking about monetary things here, and that's the purpose of this class. But when he says everything, he means everything. Okay? So whatever you can think of, it fits under the category of everything. You can't think of something that you do, that you have, that you've participated in, that you've seen, that you've enjoyed, whatever you want to use, that God does not own, control, or provide. Nothing. Nothing. Next verse, Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and those who dwell therein. The earth and everything on it, including what? Its inhabitants. All of this, all of it, everything belongs to God. So, top of the second page in this lesson, in case you missed it, the psalmist tells us that God what? Owns it all. God owns it all. All. Okay. There is not something that you have that God does not own. There is not something that you are responsible for that God does not provide. There is not something that you are involved in that God does not control. Nothing. Not your family, not your job, not your house, not your friends, not the road you drive on, not the city you live in, not the clothes you wear, not the people you come in contact with, not the color of the sky, nothing. And I think we gain the incorrect perspective when we lose sight of that. I'll get this here in a minute if it'll stay. There it goes. So, are you asking the right question about money? Are you asking the right question about money? See, the psalmist says that God owns it all. Okay? Everything. Doesn't matter. From your toothbrush to your house. From your iPad to your pet. From your vacation to your 401k. Doesn't matter. Whatever you're thinking, he owns it. Or is in control of it. Or has provided. Nothing. So this is a question that often gets asked, even of well-intentioned people. God, what do you want me to do with my money? Okay? When on the surface, it's not a bad question. It's what we think about. It's like, well, okay, somebody's going to ask God, well, would you give me some direction here? What do you want to do with my money? I want to do what you want me to do. So what do you want me to do with my money? But is that the right question? What's the right question? Yeah, Master, Lord, what do you want me to do with your money? Your money. Your stuff. Your house. Your boat, your vacation, your 401k, your iPad, your toothbrush, your fill in the blank. Because see, he's got an answer for every one of those. Think about it. What's he want you to do with your toothbrush? Take care of your teeth. Why? Well, so A, you're healthy, and B, you don't waste money on dentists. You got a toothbrush, use it. Okay? Seems kind of silly. But we're to be a steward of this body. Take care of it. So he let somebody invent a little toothbrush thing that helps us do that. It only costs $1 or $2. Or they're free at your dentist if you go often enough. So, Master, what do you want me to do with your money? That's the right question. See, when we get it framed right, this reminds me of who is the owner of everything that I have, everything that I possess, everything that I think I control. And since he owns it all, it probably makes sense that I ought to ask him what he wants me to do with it. Psalm 135, 135th Psalm. Whatever the Lord pleases, he does in heaven and on earth, in the seas and all deep places. Very simply, whatever God wants to do, he does. Why? Simple answer. He's God. And you're not. And we don't like that, because that rubs against every bit of pride and humanity that I have. But I am somebody. Look what I've made of myself. You are nobody. You've made nothing of yourself. What you are because of what God has allowed and made true in your life. That's it. That's it. And we don't like that, right? It certainly goes totally against everything the world tells us. Everything. You know, be all you can be. Daniel, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was a guy that probably understood this pretty well. Do you remember what happened to Nebuchadnezzar? What's that?
He said he had played the beast for a while.
Yeah, bad things happened to Neb, right? But he returned from that state. And look at what some of his first words are. I am nothing, you are everything, and you control it all. God does as he will in heaven and earth, and upon and for and to and on the behalf of the citizens thereof. Romans 8:28, familiar verse, right, that we hear a lot. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Notice I've underlined work together according to his purpose. Okay, so those things that are happening work together, yes, for good, but they're doing so according to his purpose. Not yours, not mine, not the government's, not your bosses, not the schools, not your parents, not your friends, His purposes. God causes all things to work together. The emphasis is on God. So when we look at these preceding verses, Psalm, Daniel, and Romans, what do they teach us about God's responsibility? Remember, He owns it all, but then we said He controls it all. What do we learn about that? Has He given up control? Has He ceased being God? So God has retained ultimate control of every event and thing on the earth and in heaven. He's in control, total control. Because if you say He's not, then what does that do instantly? Yeah, it makes Him no longer omnipotent. And that's a character of God that is undoable. Right? Matthew 6:33, but seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Right? So first, He gives us a priority. Seek God's kingdom and righteousness. And He adds what's needed, according to Matthew 6:33. Philippians 4:19, Paul, writing to the church of Philippi, says, and my God will supply every need of yours according to His riches in glory in Christ Jesus. So according to Paul, God supplies all my needs. And what storehouse does He draw off of? My bank account? The government's Social Security program? The government's Medicare or welfare program? Is He relying on those to get you and I what we need? No. His riches. Well, where are those? Everywhere. They're all His, remember? They're all His. By the way, stuff doesn't just kind of come into existence. Okay? It was already created. Man creates nothing. It's not his ability to do so. He can make things. He can create nothing. So all we do is take all the stuff that God already created and rework it. And we put it in different ways, and we reshape it, and we reformulate it, and we go, ooh, look what we discovered. Yeah, you discovered something God created. Congratulations. And that's not a bad thing. But we often attribute those things as though the person who discovered it was somehow responsible for its creation. But God alone creates. Romans 8:28 again. Let's go back to that verse, but let's emphasize a couple different phrases. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. That's how we first saw it, right? Now let's change the emphasis. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called. So the emphasis shifts a little bit when we look at it from a different perspective. They work together for good for those who love God. So not only are things working together for good in their very general sense, but they're also for those who love God for our good, for their good, for that group's good. Let me remind you of something that we forget sometimes. God does not need a prosperous economy to provide for His children. Never has. So why are you worrying about the economy? Why do you care? What are we going to do? You're going to do what you've always done. You're going to receive whatever God sends your way. God does not require a prosperous economy to take care of His own. You struggle with this? Can you really rely on God as the owner, the controller, and the provider of everything? See, as we get down to the bottom part of that second page of that lesson, the world or fool says, what I possess, what? I alone own and control. See, that's the world's mentality. What I possess, I alone own that. I alone control that. That's mine to do what I will with. Matter of fact, I have the constitutional right to do that. Right? Okay? The right to hold property. Okay? The Bible, the wise, says this: what I possess, what? God alone owns and controls, and God alone provides what I need. Now, I think we all struggle with this. I think this is an issue for all of us. But it's one you've got to get over. It's one you've got to work through and let God help use these verses to gain an understanding of His responsibility in this thing we call money and possessions. So remember, we're talking about who's responsible for what. And what we've just told you is God is responsible for owning, controlling, and providing. That is not your job. That's His. He's already got it. He can't take that job away from you. Like me going down to where one of you work and trying to take your job, and you're currently working at your job. So I go, hey, get out of here. I've already got this. Somebody already has that role. It's not yours. So quit trying to usurp God's authority and quit trying to pretend like you own anything. Quit trying to pretend like you actually are responsible for providing what you have. And quit trying to pretend like you are in control of the events and the things that occur. And if you think you are, think about Nebuchadnezzar, who was a very well-to-do king, till God intervened and said, you're paying attention to the wrong things. Let me take you through a little process here and help you understand who I am. And you have all probably faced something like that already in your Christian walk, right? Where God has said, hey, sorry, over here, let me get your attention. And He causes things to occur. Where'd that come from? How'd that happen? That was out of left field. Wasn't planning on that. Yeah? His ways are not your ways. His plans are not your plans. So maybe you struggle with this because of what Isaiah said in 51:13, that you've forgotten that the Lord, your master, who stretched out the heaven and laid the foundation of the earth. You've forgotten the Lord, your master, who did these things. He stretched out the heaven and laid the foundation of the earth. Do you really think your financial challenges are too difficult for the one who laid out the foundation of the earth? Who created the heavens? Really? You have a very small God. Or you're placing your trust in the wrong place. You think your job is to own, control, and provide. And it's not. It simply is not. All right, so we just pounded through a lesson. I'm on time. So, what do we learn? Seek and follow godly advice. Brother William, would you step forward, please? I need your assistance again. I promise that's all. Just need your help. Acknowledge that you spend money on things you value. Place value on what God values and spend money accordingly. Give up ownership, control, and dependence upon everything you possess, returning that responsibility to God. Thank you, sir. So in addition to the things we've learned about seeking counsel, acknowledging that we do spend money on the things we value, those things go hand in hand, they're inseparable, and that we should place value on what God values, those things that are eternal, and spend our money accordingly. But now it's time for you and I to give up ownership, control, and dependence upon everything you possess, giving that responsibility back to God where it rightfully belongs. So Brother William is handing out the next lesson. And you say, okay, so God owns, controls, and provides everything. So what's left? What's left? Here's a key concept for this lesson. We are stewards, responsible for faithfully managing what God provides. We are stewards, we are stewards responsible for faithfully managing what God provides. What do you think a steward is? When you think of steward, what do you think instantly? What first comes to your mind?
Gopher.
Manager, a what?
Gopher.
A gopher?
Like a I love both.
Oh,
Oh.
how you're dating yourself. That gopher, the Love Boat, steward on the Love Boat.
You asked.
I did. I'm sorry. I forget that you're in the audience. But that's often what we do think about. If not gopher, a steward. That's not a bad first thought. What's a steward do like gopher?
He takes care of your money when you're on the ship.
It takes care of stuff for you on your behalf. Okay? They're charged with taking care of your stuff, your possessions, those things.
Scott, the word that came to my mind was discernment. Because it's all His. He provides for us. And then it's our responsibility to obey what He tells us to do with it. And in this day and age where there are phone calls and we need money for this and there are lots of needs in this church and other churches and worldwide missions, that's something that I certainly pray for is, Lord, thank you for what you're doing, but now give me some discernment as to where it should go. And I mentioned our work in Sun Prairie and how at the beginning, praying for discernment, it just wasn't hitting me that is where I ought to be going with some of it. But through prayer and obedience, it just all of a sudden became very clear that, Steve, that's a work that's important that you need to be a part of. And to me, that's the difficult part, is knowing, well, for sure. I mean, we can think and, well, I hope this is what I'm supposed to get, but I like it to be a little clearer than that. And I guess when I think of...
You want an email?
Yeah.
Or a phone call?
I think of being a steward and having the discernment to do what God really wants you to do with it.
Yeah, steward, someone who manages another's property, finances, or affairs. Okay, someone who manages another's property, finances, or affairs. One who is in charge of the household affairs or a large estate. Synonyms for the biblical term steward. Here are three: manager, overseer, and superintendent. You can pick any of those you like. Manager, overseer, and superintendent. So follow this next fill in the blank. A steward does not what? Anything? Own. A steward does not own anything. A steward holds in trust, and uses what they have been, what? Given. For the one who owns it. So a steward does not own anything. A steward holds in trust and uses what they have been given for the one who owns it. That's the job of a steward. They own nothing. They simply take and in trust use that which they have been given for, on behalf of, as would the one who owns it. For, on behalf of, and as would the one who owns it. I saw this statement and I thought it was pertinent. Owners have rights, stewards have responsibilities. Owners have rights, stewards have responsibilities. And you all know this. Okay? You all work for somebody, or you report to somebody in some kind of a setting. Okay? Whether that's you're a student in a class, whether that's you're an employee and have an employer, or whether you even think about this as it relates to God. But there are things I'm responsible for that I don't have the right to do with as I please. They're not mine. They're entrusted to me for the purposes to which I've been called or employed. Okay. We encounter this all the time. But see, we want to have rights. We don't. It's not ours. It's God's. We don't have the right. And that rubs us the wrong way. Psalm 8:6, the 8th division of Psalm. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet. I like this verse. And if you write it down, circle this. Circle you, have given man dominion / rule over your, circle that word, your works. You, circle that word, you have put all things under man. Again, pointing us back to who owns, controls, and provides it all. It's God who has given man dominion and rule. It's God's works that we are responsible for. It's God who has put all of it under man. This is a great verse. This really is. This refutes a lot of the current thinking of today's world, okay, about how man and other beings are equal and how all these other wonderful things, and whether it's a tree or a rock and a man are all equal. They're not. Okay, they're not. They are all subject to man. Okay, they are subordinate to man. Everything on the planet is subordinate to man. Everything. Okay. It's here for our benefit. And then we'll talk about what that benefit is. 1 Corinthians 4:2. 1 Corinthians 4:2. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. Now, Paul is writing to the church of Corinth here, and the subject matter is the gospel. Okay? He's said in verse 1 how he is a steward of the gospel. Okay? But the concept of stewardship still applies, because we know that whatever we have, whether it's the gospel God's delivered us, whether it's a talent he's given us, whether it's our bank account, our house, our job, or whatever, that we're still just a steward. We're not the owner, we're the steward. And as such, our role is to be faithful. Our role is to be faithful. It is required that a steward be faithful of all, in all things. Faithful. What does that verse mean? To be faithful. In this context, in the context of money and possessions, what is faithful stewardship? What does it mean? Brother Steve hit it on a minute ago. What's that? Trustworthy? Yeah, trustworthy is a really good synonym here. Okay. That we're to be trustworthy because we've been given a trust. Okay, remember? What we have is a trust. And that trust has been provided us, and we're to be trustworthy, worthy of the trust. We're to carry out the duties of stewardship. That means caring for and using the things entrusted to me in a manner that's trustworthy. Proving as a steward that I am reliable with what God provides. Proving that as a steward that I'm reliable with what God provides. Now, the next set of verses is rather lengthy. And I don't know that we'll read it all, but you know it. And see, this is the parable of the talents. Okay? In Matthew 25th chapter, verse 14 through 29. And so we'll give you the Cliff Note version, right? So the master's going away on a long journey, and he calls 3 stewards, servants, to him and says, I'm entrusting you with 5 talents, I'm entrusting you with 2 talents, and I'm entrusting you with 1 talent. I'm gone. The one with 5 talents went out, invested, and made 5 more. Doubled the amount of talents that his master left him. The second took the 2 and did the same. Doubled the amount of talents that his master had left him while he was gone. The third reasoned with himself. Okay, there is his first mistake, thank you. That's his first mistake, right? Remember, a fool has said in his heart there is no God. Okay. A fool thinks in his own eyes that what he's doing is right. Okay. Those verses should come to play in your mind right now when we see this third steward saying, I reasoned that my master was hard, and my master demanded performance, if you will. And so I didn't want to lose this. I was afraid. So I hid my talent. And the master did what? After a long time, he came back. And he said to the first who got 5, what did he say?
Well done, my good and faithful servant.
Yeah. What else did he say to him?
Faithful over little, I will make you ruler.
Yeah, he said, you've been faithful over this little, I want to make you ruler over much. Enter in what? Enter into the joy of the Lord. And he came to the second and said virtually the same thing. Virtually the same thing. One had 5 and doubled, one had 2 and doubled. They both got the same commendation. You did well. I'm going to give you more because you managed what I gave you well. And you will have joy. To the third, he said what? You're lazy? You're afraid? You get what I gave you taken away from you. And I'm going to give it to the one who did the most with what I gave you. And so you're going to have no longer what I provided you, but I'm taking that away. You go hang out in outer darkness. Don't get too spiritual about that. So we have 3 stewards. 2 who were faithful, who were trustworthy, and 1 who was not. And 1 who was not. There's something I really love about this verse. The master said that he gave to each one according to his ability. See, the master already knew what performance to expect from each of his servants before he ever handed out talents. But still, knowing the one who got the 1 talent only, he still provided the opportunity for that one to prove himself as a steward who was trustworthy. So just because you get something, it's not a blessing necessarily. So let me ask you this question. Is money a test or a trust? Is money a test or a trust? Yes, is the answer to that question. It's a test and a trust. He's entrusted it to us, even when he kind of knows what we're going to do. Okay. But it's a test, not for us to pass in the sense of, see, God, I did the right thing, but for us to grow and do the right thing. So he can say what? Well done. You're good. You're a faithful steward. Enter in to the joy of the Lord. And oh, by the way, here's more. Go do likewise. So, based on faithful stewardship, how we use what is entrusted to us. Those that manage faithfully gain and are joyful. Those who manage in an untrustworthy manner or do not manage at all lose and are in misery. So just ask yourself this question, and it's a pointed question regarding your finances. Are you gaining and joyful, or are you losing and miserable? Is it a test or a trust? It's both. Luke 16:10. One who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much, and he who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. So the fill in the blank here says, if I am not what? Faithful with small things, little things, minor things, there will be no big things for me. Pure, plain, and simple. If you mentally aspire to manage great wealth for God, and you cannot handle the little wealth He provides you, you're kidding yourself. He will not waste it upon you. One who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. Luke 16:12. And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? So here's the fill-in. If I am not what? Faithful with others, apostrophe S, okay, things that belong to others. If I am not faithful with others' things, I will not be trusted to care for things on my own. Now you say, well, how does that apply? Because you said everything comes from God. I don't get this part. Well, let me explain this to you, because you all grow up in this verse. Every one of you. I did it and you did it. If I'm not faithful with what belongs to another, then I'm not going to be trusted with things to care for my own. I'm not going to be given, if you will, my full stewardship. Okay? What does that mean? Well, we all start out caring for those things that belong to another steward. How do I know that? Because when you're all born into this world, you own nothing, even in the world's terms of owning, right? Whatever you have came from where? Your parents. Okay? And what do? They buy things for you, and they entrust them to you to enjoy if it's a toy, to not ruin if it's clothing, whatever the case may be, to not waste if it's food. We all start out learning how to take care of things that belong to somebody else. When we start out, we're not even a steward. We're a steward in training. Okay? That's all we are. That progresses through life. Kids go to school. How do you treat school books? How do you treat pencils and supplies? How do you treat the common facilities? How do you treat the lunch food that comes your way? Do you want to have a lot, to do a lot for God with? Treat those things that belong to others as they would have them treated. Your parents, your employer, think of your employer. How do you treat their time, their resources, their assets? How about the church? How do you treat the church's resources, the church's assets? Oh, I left the lights on. Oh, somebody will get them. No, you get them. Treat them as though they're yours. And more will be given to you to treat well. Luke 16:1 and 2. You remember this verse? Remember the rich manager? Charges were brought against him. He was wasting possessions. And the boss came up and said, you don't have a job anymore. So Luke 16:1 and 2, fill in. If I am not what? Faithful with God's possessions, I may get fired. Pure, plain and simple. I may get fired. Just like this steward. If I am not faithful with God's possessions, I may get fired. By the way, just like this steward, we will all give an accounting someday. That's what the whole reason Christians have a judgment day, right? Ours isn't about whether we're going to heaven or hell. Ours is about what you do with what I gave you. Your talent, your time, your money, your resources, your skills, your children. What you do with all that. Think about this relative to stewardship. Stewardship is like a child who goes to his father and says, Daddy, could you please give me $10 so I could go buy you a present? That's happened to all of us, right? We've all had kids. They've all said, I want to buy you a birthday present. Can I have some money to buy you a birthday present? Sure. Here's $10. So the father does this, right? And is certainly pleased by receiving the gift from his child. But only a fool would think that the father is $10 to the better in that transaction. The $10 came from the father to begin with. And the child was merely expressing their love by wanting to do something. It was something that they were given control and care and trusted with. And see, that's us. We're given control and care and trust of these kinds of things so that we can do with them, but they all belong to the Father. And He, like this Father, wants simply to be pleased with what we do with them. He wants to say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord." I have said this, and I have heard this said, God does not need our money. And that's a true statement. But not for the reason I used to believe. We used to say, God doesn't need our money, He can do without it. Well, that's right, He doesn't need our money, but it's got nothing to do with what He can do with it, with and without. He doesn't need our money because it's already His. It already belongs to Him. It is His. Luke 14:13. So therefore, any of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. So therefore, any one of you who does not forsake all, renounce all that he has, cannot be my disciple. Jesus. Another confession. I used to think this verse meant that a disciple of Jesus needed to be willing to give up everything. If ever called upon to give up things, that I would do so. And that's a true follower. I was wrong. In fact, we have been asked to renounce our interest in and ownership of everything, transferring the rightful ownership back to God where it belongs, and get out of our little picking head that we own this stuff. So when he says to us, if you're going to be my disciple, you have to give up everything. That's what he means. It's not ours. It's God's. It belongs to him. Wouldn't you like to hear these words? Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. You can. And I believe not only can you hear that in eternity to come, but I believe you can hear that here on earth. Okay? That you can hear on earth, hey, you're doing what I asked you to do with what I gave you. Here is more for you to control. And in so doing, you will enter into a joy that you've yet to experience. That's financial peace. So we add to our list, not only do we need to give up ownership, control, and dependence upon everything we possess, returning that responsibility to God, but we need to manage everything that God provides faithfully, treating it not as our own, but as God's, because it is. Because it is. Now, yes, there is homework this week. Brother William? I know you're all just itching to start on the practical side of stuff, and so that's what this is. So take this home and begin filling this out starting on Friday. Friday is what? March 1st. Okay. So for the entire month of March, your job is to fill out this. The first page you will see are 12 categories of where you spend your money. Okay, just to give you a little idea, are things listed under those categories so you know what belongs in them. The second two pages are to be set side by side, and you'll see a date down the side, 1 through 31, and this therefore covers all months. And you write your family name on the top of the first page, and the second page of this spreadsheet, you write your month, so it will be March of 2013. And then every day, no less than every week, write down where you spend your money. Every penny. Okay? Every penny. How much of it goes to charity? How much of it goes to savings? How much of it goes to housing? How much to utilities? How much to food? How much to clothing? What's the next one? How much to transportation? How much to medical? How much to insurance? How much to personal needs? How much to recreation? And how much to debt? And then at the end of the month, you will total all of those columns up, and then you will put a grand total in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay? That is your homework, and I will be checking on you. This is absolutely critical. Okay? This is not a step to be avoided. If you avoid this step, you will miss out so much opportunity to improve your financial health. So much. And it's a problem, it's difficult. Hey, if you use a debit card, every debit card gives a receipt. All you got to do is ask for it and keep it. Okay? And sit down that night and go, that went to there, that went to there, that went to there. Okay? If you use cash, get the receipt, keep the receipt, write on what it's for, go home at night, write it down, whatever it may be. When you pay your bills, if you have trouble discerning what goes into a category, feel free to call me, but it doesn't matter. More important is just get it recorded. Okay? Next week, we start on the big 4-letter word, debt. Okay? So debt. So, thank you for your time, letting us get through those 2 lessons quickly. Have